Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at how you want to build your Sayu. Let's not waste any time and get started. The Sayu that I'm going to be using for the calculation is going to be based off of the demo Sayu. Level 80 pre-ascended, because Mihoyo doesn't make sense, and what's nice is that as she levels, her EM does go up. From what I can see, Sayu should be used as a sub DPS, and I honestly don't see a huge reason why you should really use her normal attacks, so I'm not really going to be focusing on them in this video. For her skill Fleeing Dash, I would never use her Press. The reason for this is because you only obtain 2 energy particles for this. If you're going to be using her press or you want to do it really quickly, just hold and then immediately do a press, as you'll be able to obtain an additional energy particle just from this one extra step. And trust me, you want as much energy you can get for Sayu, since a burst does cost 80 energy. Now, Sayu can only be one element when she goes into the wheel, meaning she can't absorb additional or change elements when she's in this state. She can be in this state for a maximum duration of 10 seconds, with only a cooldown of 11 seconds, which is pretty insane in my opinion. Since she'll be dealing anemo damage during this whole time, you will also eventually trigger her talent, Someone More Capable, which will allow you to heal your party members for every swirl you do every 2 seconds, which is dependent on your EM. Her burst, Mujina Flurry, she summons a Daruma that has similar prerequisites of a C0 Bennett, but the only difference is that the Daruma attacks the opponent instead of buffing your party, and just like Bennett, you eventually want to get a C1 Sayu so the Daruma can heal and damage the opponents at the same time. The Daruma will do 1 initial burst hit and heal your whole team, and will take 6 actions, where it'll heal your active character or attack the enemy unless Sayu is C1. If your Sayu is ascended 4 times, then she will have no work today, where if you're in co-op and you have other characters near you, then nearby characters will be healed 20% of the heal that was done. In addition, the AoE of its attack is increased as well. Even though the Daruma has a massive range, do be aware that if there's no enemy nearby, then the Daruma will only be healing you, and if you're not in the range of the Daruma, then it really just does nothing the whole time. Hopefully that helps you understand how Sayu generally works. Since her skill allows it to maneuver quickly for a long time, causing multiple swirls, I do highly recommend making an EM build for Sayu. Assuming you have Nagamasa, the craftable, and the trio EM Sands, Goblet, and Circlet with some EM boosts on the other artifacts, you'll have up to this amount of EM, which enables you to do around this much swirl damage. The more enemies that are present, the more opportunities you are able to swirl and even double swirl, and also do other transformative reactions, which will allow you to spread out massive damage. However, this is only if there's a lot of enemies. If you're only going against one enemy, it is going to be difficult to use her skill to consistently swirl, as it resets the element applied on the enemy. And even with elemental infusion, the internal cooldown takes some time for the element to be reapplied on her. This is also a similar case to the Daruma, as it can only swirl every other attack. Hence, use an EM build if there's multiple enemies. If not, you could probably go with the alternate option of a DPS build, which is attack resistance sands, Anemo Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage circlet. Now, even if you're only really using Sayu to heal your team, I would still go with the EM rather than attack percent. Someone More Capable talent will also activate on a burst swirls as well. From here on out, I will be going over how to build specifically an EM Sayu, and I also base this off if you're not using another Anemo character as well. For her artifacts, I would recommend prioritizing on EM, since that's where the bulk of her damage is going to be. And for how much ER you need for Sayu, I'm honestly not too sure. For this video, I just did 165.3% just because those were the empty substat slots I just had, and Nagamasa's substat also added onto it. Hopefully the ability of Nagamasa will help out as well. After that, you want to be focusing on attack percent and then crit rate and crit damage to boost her initial damages. Just go for a 4-piece Viridescent, as it boosts your swirl damage significantly, and if the swirl was the same element as Hayu's elemental infusion, she would be dealing extra damage due to Viridescent's elemental debuff. Alright, now the question will be, what weapons should you use on her? As always, I'm only really going to be focusing on 3 and 4 star weapons, but I actually think that these are the weapons that you want to be going for in the first place, since they're the only ones that boost ER and EM other than Skyward Pride. But Skyward Pride's ER is pretty low, and I think the other weapons have better abilities that will benefit Sayu a lot more. First is going to be Bloodtainted, the 3-star weapon. So you probably have another character continuously doing electro or pyro damage like Beido's or Xiangling's burst if you're going to be using this weapon. Since the weapon substat is EM, you'll most likely have to get an ER Sands for Sayu, which is honestly really similar in damage to Nagamasa if the ability is always active with the same EM. However, Bloodtainted's ability won't always be active due to swirl clearing the elements, and this will also mean for your team composition, you're limited to only pyro and electric characters. In addition, Bloodtainted's low base attack honestly doesn't really help in some of the damage output it's going to give out. So I personally wouldn't use Bloodtainted, as there are other 4-star options that will benefit you more, I would say. A similar weapon to Bloodtainted would be Rainslasher, which does have similar issues as Bloodtainted, so you do need to ER sands, and your ability is not always going to be active, but it does have the same base attack as Nagamasa, so Rainslasher will be doing very similar or more damage compared to Nagamasa. Main difference is that instead of a Pyro character, you will want to be using a Hydra character as well in this team composition. In addition, you'll be doing slightly less swirl damage, but it's really not much of a difference in this build. Rainslasher works pretty well, but just know that you'll be limited to a Hydra and Electro team for Sayu, and the ability will not always be active. Next is Nagamasa, which works well for Sayu due to the ER substat and the ability to give her a little boost in her skill and to get closer to her burst after she activates her skill. However, there's 2 other weapons that I think will actually work well for Sayu, so you might not need to craft Nagamasa if you don't want to use Rainslasher or Bloodtainted. First one is going to be Favonius. I believe R1 Favonius Great Sword can be better than R1 Nagamasa, but this is only if you're planning on using your whole skill continuously, since the skill is dependent on when she crits. Hence, for this build specifically for Favonius, you might want to boost her crit rate up so she has more chances to crit and obtain the energy. Nagamasa might function better with high refinements, but due to the difficulty to refine Nagamasa, Favonius can honestly work pretty well for Sayu. The other one is Sacrificial, but this is only if you're planning on doing a hold press E. Why do I say this? Let's go over how the Sac weapons work. For the ability of Sacrificial to activate, it has some prerequisites, which is that the active user of Sac Sword must be on the field, and the ability must do damage to the opponent. If we take a look at Chi-Chi's skill, her Sac Sword has activated when her skill has hit them, so we can use her skill again. Mihoyo understood that Sac would be pretty OP on Sayu since she'd be continuously doing damage with her skill, and you'll eventually activate Sac's ability. So how exactly did Mihoyo nerf Sayu with Sac? Players have started to notice that the ability only activates at the last hit, specifically when she does her kick. This is strange as Sayu meets both of the prerequisites to activate the ability. You might say that maybe the ability only activates when the ability is on cooldown. However, when you equip Diluc with Sac Sword, his E ability is able to reset even when it's not on cooldown. Hence, we can see that Mihoyo intentionally put this nerf for Sac on Sayu. Now, this doesn't mean that Sac is bad, just be aware that if you're going to be using Sac Sword, the ability only activates after the kick. Hence, you'll want a high refined Sac Sword since the ER isn't that great on it. Now last is, Sayu has some really good constellations, so let's take a look at what her constellations are. C1 is basically the same as Bennett's, which is a Daruma ignores the HP limits and will simultaneously heal and attack opponents. However, it's actually even better than Bennett's ability. Recall that the Daruma heals you when there's no enemy nearby. This actually means that C1, the Daruma will continuously heal you and attack enemies until it disappears even if you're at max health, in comparison to Bennett's ability, which only works up until 70%. C2 increases the potential of a whirlwind kick, damage by all the way up to 66%, which if you're going to be using this skill for a long duration, it is going to boost your damage by a good amount. C3 just boosts your burst damage by increasing the level by 3. C4 basically allows Sayu to recover energy every time she triggers a swirl every 2 seconds. C5 boosts her skill damages by raising her talent level, and then C6 basically just wants you to build an EM Sayu, as his total attack and heal from a burst is boosted based on her EM. Now, to reach the max 400% attack boost, you would need an insane 2000 EM, which I'm assuming the majority of you will not be able to reach this, even with foods, buffs, and even with sucrose. However, even with around 700 EM, we see a good increase on her burst damage and her heals. Honestly, Sayu looks like she'll be able to provide a lot of support for your team and will be able to do a lot of damage to opponents. So I'm interested to see how you all perform as Sayu and what teams you come up with, and she'll only get better as she gains more constellations. I hope this was helpful for all of you, and I will see you all in the next video.